Hi, I'm Deborah Hamilton. Welcome to my podcast, Why Do Pets Matter? 10 years ago, with my iPhone and a script, I recorded the first episode of the Ultimate Pet Resolution Summit, which chatted with experts about conflicts over animals. Our conversations were intimate, honest, and illustrated how disagreements over animals occur and how those disagreements can reshape people's lives and relationships. In November 2019, I started Why Do Pets Matter, a new podcast that continued these informative discussions. I'm so excited to have you here with me, continuing my exploration into a more meaningful conversation about why pets matter to all of us. My guests and I will share ideas, stories, and experiences straight from the heart, unscripted and holistic. From the bravest moments to the most brokenhearted, we will explore how to resolve disagreements over animals differently. One thing I know for sure is I want to have more meaningful conversations that will help all of us unlock that deeply felt human-animal bond that drives the emotions of conflict. Hi, this is Deborah Hamilton, and today we're going to talk with Jen Shryock. Oh my God, Family Paws. This is the conversation you want to have before you have a baby, and we're going to do another podcast if you're beginning a blended family. This one focuses on the respect and understanding that you need to have when you're introducing your dog to other people's children or to your new baby. So let's hear what Jen has to say. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Jen Shryock. She is this phenomenal woman who has started and is running a great program and organization called Family Paws. And Jen, thank you so much for being here. It's taken us a little bit to get here, but I'm so glad you're here. Tell us a little bit more about Family Paws and what you do there and how you do it and what your mission is.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And Family Paws is an organization or company that I started in 2002 because I saw a need for support for new and expecting families with babies and dogs. And I saw that need through volunteering with German Shepherd Rescue. And we got a lot of phone calls into our support line or our voicemail that were either people feeling like they needed to surrender their dog because they're having a baby, or they had a bite incident and were looking to rehome their dog. And both cases were really heartbreaking to me. I have a degree in special education and elementary education. And I worked a lot with newborns and their families. And so it's kind of the perfect combination of careers for me with everything that I love. So I feel really fortunate.
Well, we always love to do what it is that makes our hearts sing, and just watching you and hearing you talk about it, it's interesting. When I first started to have children, my thought was, what do I do about my dogs? Because I had my dogs first, and they were my first children. And I made a concerted effort to introduce them to the smells and everything about the baby, and let them in the baby's room before the baby got there, and everything was collaborative with the dogs. I had 3 of them, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
I also wrote articles for my OBGYN's newsletter on how to introduce your pets to your newborn. And that was back in 1989, 1990. So we were kindred spirits way back when.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you our wonderful question, and then we're going to go from there, because I know we're going to run out of time before we run out of things to say. Jen, why do pets matter to you?
They matter to me on so many levels. They enrich your lives, they help your health, they keep your sanity. Whenever I'm having a bad day, I can look at my animals and I remember they don't know what's going on in the world. They don't know anything, and they help to ground me. And so I think that they're so valuable in the lessons that we learn if we're open to learning from them. They are the greatest teachers. And so they matter to me incredibly as confidants and just for love.
I love that, because they are teachers. I think that if we ever take the time to really look at our dogs and see what they're doing, they are always teaching us something, and they're always trying to learn something about how we feel, what's going on for us, so that they can support us.
Yeah, they're absolutely constantly watching everything that we do and looking for ways to interact and engage. And some are more intuitive than others, but boy, when they're intuitive and they're paying attention, it's really a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Oh my God, we've all had those heart dogs that thought our thoughts before we did and were always there for us. I've
Yes.
had I've had several. And someone once asked me which dog was your favorite, and I said, well, I can't really say because every single one of them was different, and the adventure with them was different, and the adventure with my children was different. And so
Yes.
I thought having Jen on today for everyone who's listening is really important because why do pets matter to her and why is she in service to people who are having children or who have children and don't know what to do with their dogs would be a great topic because there is a way to make sure that everyone remains safe. The children, the dog, the people, everyone remains safe. So, Jen, tell me a little bit about some of the incidences that you have worked on or that you have helped people navigate when maybe, their pet didn't turn out to be a good fit with a baby, and things that you've suggested that they do that either includes the pet in the family or something else.
Yeah, so there's incidences that we have included, that we include the dog. We try always to keep the dog in the home as long as we possibly can. There are times that a dog may not be a dog that is comfortable around children, and that's something that we assess as well, if they aren't. But I definitely have worked with cases where there's been growls, usually growls, some where there's been a bite to a child, but that's harder to recoup from. It's harder for the child, it's harder for the parents, it's hard once trust is broken. So we usually, try to avoid that at all costs. And so, but those are the clients that I have. It's usually there's a growl, there's an uncertainty in the family, there's someone is uncomfortable with the dog, maybe there's some lunging or barking. I have about 5 or 6 families currently that's the case. There was lunging at the newly crawling toddler. And so we have to work with that. We have to work and, use barriers and use treats and use lots of positive methods to incorporate, include the dog in a safe way that where they can start to feel comfortable and start to let their guard down. And sometimes that involves using, the support of a veterinary behaviorist. But it's really, really, really important that we do all we can to help keep everybody as safe and comfortable, dog wise and child wise in the home, and that
That
takes
is so
cooperative effort.
Oh, it absolutely does. And that's the most important piece because we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, no pun intended. Uh, and give the dog the opportunity, if the dog can be acclimated.
Yeah.
Babies are smelly things that come upon them without any warning. All of a sudden they're there. I remember when I brought my kids home, I sent my husband in with the baby, and I went in by myself for all the dogs to say hello to, but I was wearing a bunch of, the blankets and things and clothes in my pockets so that I smelled like the baby as well as I smelled like myself. And they were very interested. But you mentioned so many things that are really important for people who are planning to have children and have dogs right now, or maybe they didn't think about it and now they're having an issue because when the baby was an infant and sort of a blob, the dog paid no attention to it, or the cat, because it could happen with cats too.
It can happen with cats.
You
Yeah.
do you do dogs, but it could happen with cats too. I know people put screen doors on babies' rooms to make sure that if the cat doesn't necessarily like the child. And I want to emphasize, and I think you might agree with me, um, there's there's no bad dog. It's just that this is a new environment that we can't sit them down and say, hey, your brother's coming home and we're so glad and aren't you happy, after it's been the center of everyone's life, and then all of a sudden um it's not the center of everyone's life. And
Yeah, it's a novel stimuli. It's a novel stimuli that the dog is unfamiliar with, and it's a living creature that moves, wiggles, talks, makes
cries
all sorts of noise.
loudly.
Yes, they make lots of noise. They move in lots of different ways. And so this is unusual for dogs. And some dogs act in a way that they would if it was a squirrel, and other dogs act in a way as if it was a toy, while other dogs don't care.
Yeah,
um,
and just
poor
lay
dogs.
there, and that's a
Yeah,
good point, because I think that a lot of people think dogs should just accept babies automatically and lay there and be sort of tortured, and the dog should just lay there quietly. And me having Irish setters, which are pretty big dogs, and I had males and females, uh, my kids were always taught to, as long once they could understand. I mean, when they're toddlers and they're moving around,
right.
you can try to, as you said, put barriers up, maybe put them in the dogs in their crates or whatever, cover the crates so the kid's not sticking his fingers in, because you have to give them a place to get away as well.
Mhm, mhm. But it's really important that we start including children as early as we can in different things, but with parent-guided activities, and that's where I think a lot of things go wrong, is that people think that dogs and children should just freely be able to get along, and that they go together like peanut butter and jelly, you know what I mean? They're just meant to be together. And when you think about it, a dog communicates with body language and in their own way, and a child communicates, well, they're just learning communication. So they're just learning how to communicate in the human world. So they're learning all the human things, which actually go against many of the dog communication systems. So things like direct frontal eye contact, looking, directly at someone, those kinds of things. A child might, pretend a dog is on a couch, and a child goes wandering over to it, cruising on the couch, and gets directly frontal eye contact with that dog. That dog may not want to get up and move. That dog might growl. That dog might turn away. And the child may, if the dog turns away, the child may look to get eye contact with the dog to regain that eye contact, because that's what we do. We thrive on eye contact. We're always saying, look at me. I'm sure you've heard 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, everybody
Yep.
look at me, going back to my preschool teaching days. But I mean, it's really, really, really important that we teach children, and really important, most of all to me, that we teach and educate parents, new and expecting parents, about how dogs communicate in a nonverbal way, because they're constantly communicating with us stress, happiness, discomfort, anxiety. And the more we know, the more we can help them in situations. And that is really key to it all. So a lot of people think, oh, I know dogs. I grew up with dogs. That was me. I grew up with dogs. I showed dogs. I showed in the 70s in conformation and obedience. And I was like, I know dogs. It's going to be a breeze. It's going to be not a problem. But you don't know that individual dog, and you don't know how that individual dog in front of you may respond to a child until you're in that situation. So preparation is really, really key and important, and we encourage it strongly.
So now I'm pregnant with a baby, and I have a dog who I've had for 3 or 4 years, because that was exactly my predicament. And I always suggested that, well, I should ask you for your suggestions. Who knows if
Mhm.
I was right? But I'll say, yes, that's what I suggested when you decide, or you tell us what a pregnant person, or a person thinking about becoming pregnant. First of all, you're nesting, right? So everything you're nurturing. So you might be even more loving toward your dog, because you're nesting and
Yeah.
you're doing all of this. You're more compassionate, you're more loving, you're more in need of that warm cuddle from the dog. What do you suggest? Because it's really important that people who are pregnant, who have dogs who they love, create that ability to have the dog understand that they're not less important.
Right.
A baby is going to come in, just by virtue of, you know excrement and throw up and everything else, that you're going to be busy.
Yeah, yeah. So we encourage, the most important thing is management, really, honestly, safety. People who have not prepared their dogs for crating or gating or separation of any kind run into the biggest trouble. because it's really hard when you have an 8-year-old dog who's never been separated before to all of a sudden try to separate them when you need to have them separated. When they think that they really want to be right up in your space and you are trying to breastfeed or just hanging out with the baby. So, and then when it comes to the crawling stage, we need to have a barrier in place because babies need to be able to practice their newly mobile skills, and a dog needs to be able to feel safe and comfortable. And so a physical barrier is needed. And so practicing that ahead of time is huge. The other thing we do is we practice with a weighted something to carry that's weighted, that's neutral, that's not so novel. It's a neutral item. It's about 10 pounds. I use like 10 water bottles in a pillowcase. It's awkward and wiggly and jiggly and it moves. And we use that to practice as if it was a baby, and we pass it and talk to it and do those things. And then eventually we add sounds into it and food into it. But I practice with something novel versus a baby doll because baby dolls are usually very light. The dogs know it's not the baby. And I really want the parents to practice with something awkward and uncomfortable, like a newborn. Newborns are uncomfortable and awkward to hold. And giving treats and responding to your dog and your dog responding to you while you're holding something, it's a little different. It's a little different. So practicing those things ahead of time really makes it so that we build the confidence in our families. So we do a lot of preparation like that.
I have to say that that's really important. What I did and what I suggested other people do was what you just said. If your dog has never been crated or never been away from you or never been, blocked off, even though when you're pregnant and you're nesting, you say, I will never do that. My dog will always be with me. Well, the dog might need space. It might not know it needs space now, but it might need space when this thing comes. And setting it up for success, buying some really good filling for a Kong and putting it behind a baby gate in the office so that it knows, oh, when I get this Kong behind the office, I can chew on this Kong. Or getting them, a
snuffle
toy that
mats.
they like, or,
Yep.
going out and throwing the ball and then knowing after I throw the ball, I go in and I rest in my crate. So I have time throwing the ball and then I go in and rest in my crate. Just something that is, as dogs will do, if you do something, they immediately think you're punishing them because, oh my God, you're putting me in this room. You're punishing me. I have to get out because I've never been in this room and I need to be out with you. And what did I do wrong? And I'm sorry. And then the barking starts and then the baby gets woken up and then you get frustrated and then all shit breaks loose.
Yeah. So we really want to practice ahead of time and make that space I call it a success station.
Yep.
Where it is a place where the dog is going to be successful no matter what. And so that success station should have treats. It should have, things like you were talking about, whether it's, topples, Kongs, licky mats, snuffle mats, things that are safe, marrow bones, stuff that they can chew on, stuff that they can enjoy, that they only get in that space. And so they learn, okay, I call it the castle, or I call it my dog's apartment, or I call it something that makes it better than just a crate or just a kennel or just something.
Right. Throwing them in those is like, I think, a last resort. If you can create a space where they can go, where they know they can go and be safe.
That's right. Unprovoked, where they can't see. So we want space where a dog can watch what's going on at certain times, but we also want space where dogs have total separation so that they're able to really sleep. That's a really big problem, I think, ever since COVID, that dogs aren't getting enough sleep. And if a dog has one eye open and is paying attention to everything that the child is doing or the family is doing, they're really not resting when they're in that crate. And we have to think about management and how that changes over time. So what management we use with a newborn stage is going to change when we hit the toddler stage, is going to change with the preschool stage. It's going to continue to change. I use management even still with my 14-year-old when she has friends over. The dogs are with me. So, it's constantly changing. And that's something that people need to think about too. They think, oh, we've introduced them, everything's great. It's a free-for-all. It's just not. That's not what we want.
Because everybody has a bad day, both children and pets. And I remember when my sons were younger, I would always put my dogs, and they loved being out in the backyard and in the kennel. So I had a kennel, and they would go, everybody would run downstairs and go outside and run their brains out and be happy as a clam, because that was their safe space. That's where they could go into their kennels, which the doors were open, and sleep, or they could go run outside and be idiots, or they could chew on a bone, or whatever they wanted to do. This was a great place. This was like the free-for-all place where nobody was telling them stop and sit and blah. And I used to do it every time my kids came over with play dates. And some of the mothers would say, "Oh, I thought you had dogs." I said, "I do have dogs." "Well, where are they?" I said, "Well, when kids are over, my dogs are not here." And they go, "Oh, aren't they safe?" And I said, "Oh, no, they're safe. I'm not sure if they understand your kids." And my message to myself was, I don't know if your kids are safe. So being that they might do something to trigger a dog that I could never imagine, because my kids wouldn't do it, right? Because my
Absolutely.
kids lived with me and knew the rules around the dogs. Because
Yeah.
that's the other piece. So here you are, you're pregnant, you're preparing your dog for the baby to come home. And then once the child becomes aware, there's also a secondary training for the children, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we want to, and this is where modeling comes in. We talk a lot about modeling. So if our expectant family understands more about body language and sensitivities in their dogs and understands about proximity, then they're able to communicate with their child. We need to be communicating with our children at an early age. They are listening. They are sponges. I think we don't take advantage of that enough. We need to say, look, he's licking his lips. We need to leave him alone for now. Or now's not a good time. So, we can broadcast what we're seeing and communicate with our child so that when they're 2, 3, they start noticing those things. I remember giving my shepherd a little bit of a squeeze, and my daughter said, "Mommy, no huggies." And I was like, "Oh yeah, you caught me." And I said, "Well, what would Duke prefer?" And she came over and showed me how to pet him, from collar to tail. And so, as the family dog suggests, and it was a beautiful thing. Could she do that all the time? No, but it was beautiful that she's taking it in, and at 2.5, to take it in and practice it is really, really, really good. But I would never expect her to follow through all the time. The next minute she could be, I could be on the phone and she could be doing something that, you know,
Right.
isn't what I want her to do because she wants attention or something. So, but it's really important that we teach body language, sensitivities about proximity so that we can have true, awake, adult aware supervision, because it's really, really, really important when it comes down to supervision that we know what supervision is. Supervision, a lot of people just say supervise kids and dogs, and you can supervise your child riding a dog. You can supervise that. It's not safe. We want people to know what they're looking at and what is safe to supervise and when to intervene. The more that we listen to the dog's subtle cues in body language, the less likely we're going to have an escalation to a growl and a snap and a bite.
It's so important. And what the dog might not have a problem with today, tomorrow or a month from now or a year from now, if they're older and they're a little more arthritic, might not be okay. Well, he always did mind it before. Well, like you said,
Oh,
it's
so true.
reading the dog on the day. It's not reading the dog because he was okay with it for the last 6 months. We really need to be aware ourselves, first of all, as the adult in the room, haha, but also give our children, I used to say to my kids when they were running around and things, I said, you're driving the dogs nuts, and either I'm going to put the dogs in a safe space, I said,
Mhm.
or you guys need to understand that you're creating an unsafe situation that is being perceived by the dogs.
Right, right. Yeah. No, it's really important to be the advocate for your dog. Super important that we always are advocating for our dogs. And if our children are running around, I used to have to do the same thing. If you're going to be doing this activity, then the dogs are going to be over here.
Right.
We're
Yeah,
going
you
to,
just keep the dog safe. So
yeah.
what do you do? So this is a pet peeve of mine, drives me out of my mind. And I apologize to everyone who's listening to this who might say this, but dogs are supposed to be bomb proof.
Oh boy. No. No, just like I'm not bomb-proof, dogs are not going to be
Me
bomb-proof.
neither, and I'm a
Yeah,
mediator and a collaborative professional, and
yeah,
sometimes my amygdala kicks in, and dogs have amygdalas too.
yeah. And I mean, it matters about trigger stacking. So I want to go back to, you were talking about dogs and how things change. I think about grandparents who have a dog who liked the first set of grandchildren, but now they're getting older, and now a next set of grandchildren is coming, and they have the same expectation that their younger dog in its younger self is going to behave the same way in its senior self. That's just not true. It's just not necessarily the case. A lot of pain is not seen and is not diagnosed. And having had nerve pain myself in my spine, I can tell you when it's acting up and it hurts, I'm really grumbly. If someone sways this way close to me, I'm going to feel sensitive because they're in my space. And so they might bump me, and that might trigger me. That might cause me pain. And I remember, I think about that with our dogs all the time, especially our senior dogs. We have to always be looking out for the possibility that pain is a factor. So you have trigger stacking. You might have had a grooming done. You might have had a vet visit. You might have had a vacation and you're coming home, and the transition coming home. Now all of a sudden your baby is crawling when you left, the baby wasn't crawling. This is a big one that we run into problems with. So, it's babies change so fast. They can go from stationary to cruising and running around very quickly. And if you've gone on vacation and those miracles happened on vacation while your dog was boarded and now you're reuniting everybody,
Oh, and
wow.
imagine the disconnect because he was boarded, right? Because
Yeah,
that's always a
yeah,
trigger for a lot of dogs.
they were boarded, so that's a thing, and then they come home and this baby is unidentifiable to
It's
the
not
dog.
standing still, why not?
That's right, that's right. So it's when I get phone calls, and it's terrible. A lot of the phone calls I get, I would say almost every single one that I get, once we go over body language and sensitivities, all I hear is, "I wish I had known."
Yeah,
And honestly, it just breaks my heart. And that's
I
why I want
know.
to put this information out there far and wide
And
because
that's why I'm so grateful you're here. Now, you had a recent incident that I think you wanted to share with us, and I'd love for you to remember to share with us. And I'll ask you again how people can get in touch with you because you want to prepave a good relationship. You don't want to come in and fix something. I mean, you will. Don't get us wrong, everyone. She absolutely will.
yes.
Jen will. But we want to prepave so that you don't have this incident. Now, she and I have experience, and I'm not perfect. And I know Jen will say there are things that she's probably done that she said, "Ooh, shit, I wish I had a V8. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this." But we at least are aware, and we would love to share that awareness. And I'd love to share the awareness of, any recent incident you might have that you feel free to talk about, or anything you want to tell us about, because there are so many times because there's also dog on dog issues that create then an issue with a person. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's
there's
better.
lots of incidents. Unfortunately, there was an incident in the news that, involved a baby and a baby that was in a crib, and it was a fatality, and it was it's very tragic and very sad, and we don't have all the details, so we can't really comment on anything other than, the parents were saying definitely, always supervise. And one of the things that I am strongly advocating for is the fact that, it is recommended that babies sleep in the parents' room for the first 6 months. And if we're going to be doing this, we need to have a plan for the dog because most people keep their dogs in their room, and it's too late when you bring home that baby for you to then say, "Oh, what do we
You've
do?"
got to go.
Yeah, we've got to plan this all ahead of time, whether we're tethering, crating, X-penning, what we're doing, because even large dogs can use the bed to jump into a bassinet, to jump into a crib.
Even
Um,
little dogs.
Even
They're
small
like
dogs,
springboards, right?
springboards, yep. So even small dogs, so what may appear safe, there's so many things that we need to really consider and look at. And these are preventable situations. My heart goes out to this family, but they're I believe these are preventable situations through education. I
And the
really,
one
really
who
do.
pays the price is the dog who doesn't understand what he did wrong.
It's absolutely true, especially in these kinds of situations. It's, when it's an infant and a dog, a lot of times it's a lack of familiarity that the dog has not had a chance to really develop a familiarity bond with that infant. So we talk about, instead of introduction, I talk about a homecoming period, which is about 3 months, where your dog has time to really acclimate towards sights, sounds, smells, actions, movement changes of the baby. And so that's the critical period that I look at. Introduction is so limiting. People get really discouraged if the introduction doesn't go well, and it's never a one and done.
Never.
Same as, with my husband. It took me a while to get to know him, and it takes us with all relationships a while to get to know each other. And we have to allow that for our dogs. We can't expect that they know right away that this is family and that they're not going to be curious and they're not going to be the predators that they are. So not to scare people, but to put a bit of caution there. It's really, really important that we plan and prepare for the animal that we have in our home in front of us. It's really important.
Looking at how much planning and preparing people do when they're getting a baby, they get the car seat, they get the correct crib so the child doesn't have his head get caught. They get the right bedding, they get the right swing, they get the right everything. And yet this living, breathing thing in your house is sort of clueless. Yes, you're getting fat, but they don't know what that is. And yes, maybe you smell different. And yes, maybe they, are on your belly or something laying when the baby kicks and they're like,
But
what's
they don't
that?
know.
They don't know. They have no idea. So if you don't include your pet in your preparation, you may be setting the pet up for a difficult situation that could be avoided for both the baby and the pet because, this poor family lost their child, but
Yeah,
often it's simply that, well, he looked crooked at the dog, I have to get rid of it. And
yeah,
I'm only going to speak for myself, but that drives me out of my mind. And I'll say, okay, that might be the better course because you don't have the right time or inclination to help the dog adjust. So yes, I don't want anything to happen to the dog. I don't want anything to happen to the kid. So maybe it is good to give it to your brother or your sister. My neighbor right now has her daughter's dog because she just
mm,
had a baby, which it's a little Pekingese kind of thing. And is it helping the dog to adjust to the baby being with the grandparents? Not so much. However, people like you help people who have pets, who
yes,
have children already and are seeing some, sometimes the dogs don't get tense with the kids until they start running at 90 miles an hour. And then they might get, because of course, that took 3 years. So the
yeah,
dog, maybe was 2 or 3 when the kid came home. Now it's 7. It's like, wait a minute, a little too much energy. Let's slow this down. So it's
yeah,
a changing landscape with the dog because they age so much faster than your kids do. And your kids change and their adjustment might not be so clear. Jen, I am so thrilled that we've had this discussion. Please tell everyone how they can work with you, how they can get in touch with you,
sure.
any upcoming trainings you're doing. We're going to put it in the show notes too, everyone, but tell us how.
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach me at familypaws.com. You can also reach me at jen@familypaws.com. So that's an easy email. And then we have Family Paws Official on Instagram. That's our best social media. And I would say that you can also check out our webinars. We do webinars every month. So dogs and storks, dogs and toddlers, there's always one running. So that's also,
Well, that's great. I'd love for you to send me the link so I can share it with
yeah,
everyone. Because that way, when it comes up every month, like my map plan, which is coming up this Wednesday, we can share the links so they can go to it because it's repetition. Most people don't even know that people like us exist, that I help them make a plan for their pet long-term, short-term, and you help people integrate their children. We have a blended family. That's a whole different story that we can talk about on another
yeah,
podcast, maybe in a month or so, because I'm sure that's a challenge as well. Here I have a
oh yeah.
dog and used to my kids, and then I marry somebody else and the kids are different. Maybe they did have a dog, maybe they didn't have a dog, whatever it is, but you have to matriculate that. And that's a whole nother story, I'm sure.
It's complicated. It gets complicated. Having a dog and children is complicated. And I think if people look at it that way and look at it as there's always more to learn and stay curious, that's half the battle. So being open to learning is what we ask, and being open to the fact that what you knew as in your childhood may not be enough. And we are so much further along and advanced in what we know now about dogs that we can help you out so much more than we could.
Oh, I know there's a master's degree in human animal bond now in several schools. So we have learned so much about their body language, about their inner, workings and what their facial expressions mean. So it's so important to work with someone like Jen to make sure you bring your baby home and why your pet matters to that family as it grows.
Yes,
So until next
absolutely.
time.
Yeah.
This is Deborah Hamilton with Jen Shryock. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you came. We are going to have to come back and do the blended family one pretty soon because that is as important. Until next time, kiss your dogs for me. This is Deborah Hamilton. Why do pets matter? And also the MAP call and Hamilton Law Mediation. Take care. The Why Do Pets Matter podcast drops every Thursday and can be found on whichever platform you find your podcasts. Subscribe now, invite your friends, and I cannot wait to have you join me in these conversations.